This story begins in a world that was slowly dying. Cities were ruined, nations were broken, and hope was fading. For many years, people had struggled with poverty, hunger, and endless wars. Natural disasters made everything worse. Huge storms, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions destroyed what was left. Somehow, humanity managed to survive all of that. But then something new appeared. Something far worse than war or nature. A danger no one was prepared for. One night, Mary, a trained soldier, stood with her unit on an abandoned battlefield. The world was silent and dark. Mary fired a flare into the sky. The bright orange light spread across the field, and for a moment everything was visible. Then from the darkness beyond the light came a scream, loud, sharp, and terrifying. The kind of scream that freezes your blood. It was a breaker. Breakers were giant, terrifying monsters that rose from deep underground after the earth had cracked apart. As soon as they surfaced, they attacked everything. Buildings, machines, and especially humans. Mary and her soldiers fought with all their strength, knowing that one mistake could mean death. They battled through fear, fire, and chaos. Then the story moves 15 years into the future. The world has changed completely. The population is small, the cities are empty, and survival has become the only rule. Mary is still alive. She now lives with her husband, John, and their young daughter, Willa. Mary still works as a soldier, so she is often far from home. Because of that, John is the one who spends most of the time with Willa, teaching her everything she needs to know about life, safety, and survival. One day, John is explaining breakers to Willa. She looks up and asks, "Are they aliens?" John gently shakes his head and replies, "No, they are not aliens. They have always been here, hidden under our feet." He explains that when the earth cracked and the structures underground collapsed, the breakers finally came out. The places where the ground split open and the monsters appeared are now known as the Stitch. He also tells her that the nuclear attacks during the old wars destroyed the last barriers holding those creatures underground. Once those barriers broke, the breakers started spreading across the world. But Willa isn't interested in science or history. She interrupts John and says, "Tell me a hero story. Tell me about Kodiak." Kodiak was a legendary warrior. People whisper that he once killed 100 breakers with just one strike of his axe. No one knows if it's true, but the story gives people hope. When Mary returns home between missions, she also tells Willa stories. Stories about flowers, colors, birds, and beautiful places that existed long before the monsters came. But in this broken world, those things are only memories. One evening, as the family sits together, the building suddenly shakes with a violent tremor. Military trucks rush into the streets. A loud voice echoes over a speaker. "Evacuate immediately. Breakers have entered this area." The celebration they planned for Willa's birthday disappears instantly. Fear takes over. Mary hugs Willa quickly, gives her a small gift, and prepares to leave. At the evacuation site, strict new rules have been enforced. Soldiers and their families are no longer allowed to travel together. Mary must go with her unit, and John must travel in a separate truck with Willa. They have no choice. As John sits with Willa in the crowded civilian truck, a man notices an old scar on John's arm. Panic spreads. The man screams that John might be infected. In this world, if a breaker bites a human, that person slowly transforms into a hybrid, a violent creature that behaves like the monsters. John raises his hands and tries to calm everyone. He promises he is not infected. And to prove his honesty, he swears, "If I ever show even the smallest sign of infection, I will end my life before I hurt anyone." The truck drove through long, dark roads. Outside, distant explosions shook the night and echoed like thunder. Inside the truck, people sat close together, scared and silent. To calm themselves, someone began telling the old story of Kodiak, the great hero. John leaned close to Willa and whispered gently, "Kodiak wasn't strong because of his weapon. What made him powerful was the hope he carried. Hope is what helped him defeat those monsters." He smiled weakly and added, "We must hold on to that same hope." Willa listened quietly. Slowly, her eyes closed and she fell asleep. But her rest didn't last long. Gunfire suddenly exploded around them. People screamed. The truck stopped with a violent jolt, throwing everyone forward. Fear filled the air. No one moved. No one spoke. Then, metal tore. A huge claw punched through the steel wall of the truck. It grabbed a woman and dragged her outside before anyone could react. Her scream disappeared into the darkness. Chaos broke loose. People cried, shouted, and tried to escape. John immediately understood. Staying inside meant certain death. He grabbed Willa, held her tight, and rushed outside. But what they saw was worse. Monsters, breakers, were everywhere. One breaker pulled a child away, while the mother begged and screamed helplessly. Fires burned. People ran in every direction. The ground was covered in blood and fear. John pulled Willa under another truck and told her to stay quiet. A breaker soon noticed them and stepped closer, growling. Just seconds before it attacked, a soldier ran toward the monster and fired multiple bullets, but the shots did nothing. The breaker kept advancing, so the soldier pulled out a sword and, with one fast and powerful strike, cut off the monster's head. The creature fell. The soldier removed the helmet, and it was Mary. She had found them. She had saved them. Breathing heavily, she yelled, "Run to the forest, now!" John held Willa's hand, and the three of them ran. On the way, Willa saw things she would never forget. Bodies lying everywhere, people crying for help, and some slowly turning into hybrids after being bitten. One infected old man tried to control himself, but finally used his gun to shoot a nearby soldier before the infection took over his mind. When they finally reached the forest edge, John noticed blood on Mary's face. Mary wiped it quickly and said, "I'm fine." But before they could move, Mary's expression changed. She spotted another breaker approaching. She knew what she had to do. She looked at John and Willa, her family, and told them to keep going without her. She would stay behind and fight. Willa cried and screamed, begging her mother not to leave. But John, with a broken heart and shaking hands, pulled Willa away. Mary stood alone as the monster rushed toward her. By sunrise, John and Willa reached the ocean. John had hidden a small boat there long ago, just in case. As they prepared to board, another man appeared. His hands shook, and he pointed a gun at them. His voice cracked as he said, "I'm coming with you. I won't survive here alone." John knew the truth. The boat was small. Adding a third person would sink it. So with a calm voice, he told the man he needed help checking the area before leaving. The man followed him. We never see what happens next, but John returned alone. His face had changed, cold, heavy, silent. He didn't speak about it. He simply helped Willa into the boat, untied the rope, and the two of them left the burning mainland behind. They traveled across the ocean until they found an empty island. There they began a new life. 1 year passed. John and Willa learned how to survive, how to find food, build shelter, and stay safe. John trained Willa every day, teaching her how to fight monsters, how to defend herself, and how to stay strong. They even built a small training area from branches and wood. Life became quiet, almost peaceful. But sometimes when Willa looked at the mainland through binoculars, she felt pain in her chest because she still remembered her mother. And far away, the mainland still burned, under the rule of the breakers. One day, John looked at Willa during training and asked, "Tell me, how do you kill a breaker?" Without thinking, Willa answered, "Cut off its head." John nodded, then asked quietly, "And what about a hybrid?" Willa's voice became cold and serious. "Break the brain," she said. Training became harder every day. Willa pushed herself beyond her limits. She fell many times. Her knees bruised, her hands bled, and her arms shook from exhaustion. But she always stood up again. She refused to quit. Because her body was working so hard, she needed more food, especially protein. One morning, she found a pigeon's nest high on a tree. She took 2 eggs for herself, but left one behind so the pigeon could still have babies. Even in such a dark world, she still cared. Days passed. While exploring a quiet part of the island, Willa discovered a young girl hiding behind rocks. Her name was Rosie. With tears in her eyes, Rosie explained that her family was gone, killed, and she had swum alone to this island to stay alive. Willa took pity on her. She led Rosie to a secret cave and told her to stay hidden. She shared her tiny food supply, taking less for herself so Rosie wouldn't starve. Rosie was lonely and heartbroken. To help her smile again, Willa told her made-up stories. Stories full of flowers, colors, festivals, and heroes. She also shared the legend of Kodiak, the hero who killed more than 100 breakers with just one strike of his axe. For the first time in a long time, Rosie laughed. After spending some time with her, Willa returned to her home. The next morning, she continued her training as usual, swinging her sword, practicing her aim, repeating every move again and again. But suddenly, she noticed something strange. She could no longer hear her father's voice giving instructions. She turned slowly and saw John collapse. Terrified, she ran to him and held him up. He was weak, too weak. She helped him walk home. When they reached the shelter, Willa learned the truth. John had been skipping his own meals. For days, he had been giving all his food to Willa, so she would stay strong and continue her training. Her heart broke. She didn't know he was sacrificing this much. To comfort her, John smiled weakly and handed her his sword. His voice was soft and proud as he said, "You earned this. You make me proud every day." The next day, Willa went back to the cave to check on Rosie. As soon as she stepped inside, she froze. The cave was destroyed, food scattered, walls scratched, everything torn apart. Something terrible had happened. Then in the darkness, she saw Rosie standing, silent and still. but she wasn't Rosie anymore. The wound on her head had turned black and infected. The infection had spread. Rosie had become a hybrid, a monster. Without warning, she attacked. Willa tried to run, but she slipped and fell. The creature jumped onto her, its teeth mere inches from her face. Right at that moment, John arrived. He fired several bullets, but the shots did nothing. So he rushed forward with his sword. A violent fight broke out. Fast, brutal, desperate. Finally, with one crushing blow, John smashed the hybrid's skull and ended the fight. Willa fell to the ground, crying uncontrollably. Rosie, her only friend, was gone. John held her shoulders firmly and made her look at him. His voice was serious, almost urgent. "This is not the time to cry. That scream, others heard it. The breakers will come here now. They know where we are. We need to leave, right now." They ran as fast as they could toward the far end of the island. While running, they suddenly reached a huge gap in the ground. Willa jumped across it with ease, but John stopped on the other side. Standing behind him was Rosie's brother, no longer human, now a monster. John was badly wounded. Blood ran down his arm and every breath hurt. He knew he couldn't win this fight. With a weak voice, he told Willa to leave him and save herself. But Willa couldn't do that. She refused to abandon her father. She turned around and for the first time in her life, faced a monster directly. She raised her sword with shaking hands, and with all the strength she had, she sliced off the creature's head. She saved her father, but their relief lasted only seconds. The monster's body kept moving. It still wasn't dead. Willa realized what she missed, the brain. John saw her courage and somehow found the strength to stand again. He lifted his sword and crushed the monster's skull. Only then did the body finally stop. But another hybrid was already coming toward them. John could barely move. He was too weak to fight. So Willa stepped forward again. She took a deep breath, remembered her training, ran toward the monster, and with one perfect strike, destroyed its brain. The hybrid dropped instantly. After the battle, Willa helped her father walk to the shoreline, where their boat was waiting. But when they reached it, John stayed behind. He slowly revealed a bite mark on his body. He had been infected. Willa fell apart emotionally. She couldn't imagine leaving him behind. John pulled her close and whispered his final words. "You are a fighter, just like your mother. You will do great things. You must live." With tears running down her face, Willa climbed into the boat. John cut the rope himself and pushed her away from the shore. Blood began dripping from his eyes. The infection had begun. He was changing. Willa tried to sail away as fast as she could, but the boat moved slowly. Soon John, now a monster, walked toward her. Willa lifted her sword. Her hands were shaking, her heart breaking, but she stood firm. She didn't want to fight him, but she wouldn't run from him either. Before she could act, the ground behind John exploded open. Huge breakers climbed out, dozens of them. Willa froze in fear. She thought this was the end. But then, from the ocean, 2 military boats appeared. Soldiers rushed out, firing weapons and attacking the breakers. Leading them was Mary, Willa's mother. For a moment, Willa could not understand what she felt. Shock, fear, relief, or hope. Mary looked at her daughter, alive, stronger, changed. Willa looked back, hurt but unbroken. Side by side, mother, daughter, and the last surviving soldiers prepared for the final battle. The scene held on their determined faces as chaos grew around them. And then, the movie ends.
अब आओ ना फिर से मिल जाओ ना फिर से जलाओ ना मुझे मिटाओ ना यूं दिल से अब आओ ना फिर से मिल जाओ ना फिर से जलाओ ना मुझे मिटाओ ना यूं दिल से कोई प्यार ना दे यूं जैसे मुझको चाहती है तू ज़माने के जैसी न बन मेरे यार जैसी है तू ज़माना जलाता मुझे लगाती गले फिर से तू मैं गिर के उठा हूँ अभी हर चीज सिखाती है तू मैं लिख आया कहानी अपनी जो बीती जिंदगानी अपनी जो खोया मैंने है वो खोया मैं रात जाग के हूँ रोया मैं लिख आया कहानी अपनी जो बीती जिंदगानी अपनी जो खोया मैंने है वो खोया मैं रात जाग के हूँ रोया 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 तुझसे मिलूं मैं कभी, तुझको मैं प्यार दूं और बेशुमार दूं। दिल तो जला है बहुत, इसकी सजा है बहुत, फिर भी तेरा ही रहा, मेरी नहीं मानता। जितना भी चाहूं तुम्हें, मिलना है दर्द मुझे, होता है क्या इस तरह कोई भी इश्क यहाँ। तुम जो मेरी ना बनी, किसको बताता फिरूं ये दाग दिल अपना, किसको दिखाता फिरूं। वक्त बदलता है सबका, तुझको तो इसका पता था, फिर मुंह क्यों मोड़ गई थी, मुझको यूं छोड़ गई थी। साथ निभाना था मैंने, दिल भी जलाना था मैंने, फिर क्यों मेरी ना बनी थी और ये सजा बन गई थी। जिसको मैं जीता रहा था, ये दर्द पीता रहा था। ऐसी निशानी है तू, ऐसी कहानी है तू। मैं लिख आया कहानी अपनी जो बीती जिंदगानी, अपनी जो खोया मैंने है वो खोया मैं रात जाग के रोया। मैं लिख आया कहानी अपनी जो बीती जिंदगानी, अपनी जो खोया मैंने है वो खोया मैं रात जाग के रोया रोया रोया। अब इसके पार है तेरा मेरा ठिकाना, अब इसके पार है तेरा मेरा ठिकाना, अब इसके पार है फिर तुझसे दिल लगाना, अब इसके पार है।